Jungkook lies unconscious in the ICU after a mysterious collapse. Jimin refuses to leave his side, uncovering a dark secret that threatens to tear BTS apart forever. The rhythmic, mechanical beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in the room, a sterile metronome counting down the seconds of a life that hung by a thread, sharp and unforgiving against the suffocating silence of the intensive care unit. Jungkook lay still, his body a pale, fragile outline beneath the crisp white sheets, tethered to the machinery that breathed for him, pumped blood for him, and kept the darkness at bay. His face, usually animated with mischief or focused intensity, was slack, drained of color, resembling a marble statue carved by a grieving artist. Tubes snaked from his arms and nose, transparent veins carrying life-saving fluids into his system, while electrodes adhered to his chest like metallic leeches, monitoring every erratic flutter of his heart. The air smelled of antiseptic and ozone, a cold, clinical scent that burned the back of the throat, stripping away any illusion of comfort or safety. Outside the glass window, the Seoul night sprawled out in a blur of neon lights and rain-slicked streets, indifferent to the tragedy unfolding in room 304. But inside, time had stopped. Inside, the world had shrunk to the size of this bed, to the rise and fall of a chest that struggled to draw breath, to the hand of another man who refused to let go. Jimin sat on the hard plastic chair beside the bed, his posture rigid, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. He had not slept in 36 hours. He had not eaten. He had barely blinked. His hand was wrapped around Jungkook's limp fingers, holding on with a desperation that turned his knuckles white, as if he could physically anchor Jungkook to this world through touch alone. He watched the rise and fall of Jungkook's chest, synchronizing his own breathing with the shallow, labored movements of the younger man. Every beep of the monitor was a prayer, every silence between beats was a terror. Jimin's mind was a whirlwind of guilt, fear, and fragmented memories, replaying the moment everything had shattered. It had been just an ordinary Tuesday. A routine schedule. Vocal practice, dance rehearsal, a quick lunch. Jungkook had been smiling, joking about the new choreography, complaining about the spicy ramen he'd had for breakfast. He had looked healthy. Vibrant. Alive. And then, in the middle of a high note, he had simply folded. No warning. No cry of pain. Just a sudden, boneless collapse onto the studio floor, his eyes rolling back, his body convulsing once before going still. The scream that had torn from Jimin's throat was not human, it was primal, a raw expression of pure panic that still echoed in his dreams. The doctors had rushed in, their faces masks of professional calm, but Jimin had seen the flicker of alarm in their eyes. They had carried Jungkook out on a stretcher, shouting orders, pushing through the crowd of stunned staff and members. Jimin had run alongside them, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird, screaming Jungkook's name over and over, begging him to wake up, begging him to breathe. The ambulance ride had been a blur of sirens and flashing lights, the paramedics working frantically, defibrillators charging, oxygen masks being pressed to Jungkook's face. Jimin had held Jungkook's hand the entire way, feeling the coldness seep into his own skin, feeling the life draining away. When they arrived at the hospital, Jungkook was whisked away into the emergency room, and Jimin was left standing in the hallway, surrounded by the other members, all of them pale, shaken, and terrified. RM had tried to speak, to organize, to call management, but his voice had cracked. Jean had been crying silently, his hands covering his face. Suga had stared at the closed doors, his expression unreadable but his eyes dark with dread. V had paced back and forth, muttering prayers under his breath. J-Hope had collapsed into a chair, overwhelmed by the shock. But Jimin had stood frozen, staring at the double doors, waiting for news, waiting for a sign, waiting for the nightmare to end. When the doctor finally emerged, hours later, his face was grave. "He is stable," he had said, the words offering a sliver of relief that was immediately crushed by the next sentence. "But we do not know why he collapsed. His heart showed signs of extreme stress, but there is no history of cardiac issues. We have run tests for toxins, infections, genetic conditions. Nothing has come back positive yet. He is in a coma. We are keeping him sedated to reduce the strain on his heart. It is a waiting game now." A waiting game. The phrase had sounded so trivial, so inadequate for the magnitude of the crisis. But it was the truth. They were waiting for Jungkook to wake up. Waiting for answers. Waiting for hope. Now, sitting in the ICU, Jimin felt the weight of that weight crushing him. He looked at Jungkook's face, searching for any sign of awareness, any twitch of a finger, any flutter of an eyelid. There was nothing. Just the steady, artificial rhythm of the machines. Jimin leaned forward, resting his forehead against the metal rail of the bed. He closed his eyes, letting the tears fall freely now, no longer caring about who might see. He thought about the last thing he had said to Jungkook. It had been something silly, something about forgetting to buy milk. He wished he had said something else. He wished he had told him how much he loved him. How much he depended on him. How empty his life would be without him. The regret was a physical pain, a knot in his stomach that refused to loosen. Please wake up, Jimin whispered, his voice raspy from disuse. Please, Kook-ah. I can't do this without you. The door to the room opened softly, and RM stepped in. He looked exhausted, his hair messy, his clothes wrinkled. He held 2 cups of coffee, steam rising from them in the cold air. He placed one on the bedside table, and sat on the chair opposite Jimin. He didn't say anything for a long time, just watching Jungkook, his expression a mixture of sorrow and determination. You need to eat, Jimin RM said finally, his voice gentle but firm. You need to take care of yourself. If Jungkook wakes up and sees you like this, he will be worried. He will blame himself. Jimin shook his head, not looking up. I can't eat. I can't sleep. Not until he wakes up. What if he wakes up and I'm not here? What if he needs me? He won't wake up in the next 5 minutes, Jimin, RM said, his tone sharpening slightly. And if he does, we will all be here. But you are no good to him if you collapse too. You are his Hyung. You need to be strong for him. For all of us. Jimin finally looked up, his eyes meeting RM's. He saw the fatigue in the leader's face, the burden of responsibility that RM carried for all of them. He knew RM was right. But the idea of leaving Jungkook's side, even for a moment, felt like a betrayal. I'm scared, Hyung, Jimin admitted, his voice breaking. What if he doesn't wake up? What if we lose him? RM reached out and placed a hand on Jimin's shoulder. We won't lose him. Jungkook is the strongest person I know. He has fought for everything he has. He will fight this too. We just have to give him time. And we have to be here when he wakes up. Jimin nodded slowly, taking a sip of the coffee. It was bitter and cold, but it grounded him. He looked back at Jungkook, studying the lines of his face, the curve of his lips. He remembered the day they had met, years ago, when Jungkook was just a shy boy from Busan with big eyes and a powerful voice. Jimin had been drawn to him immediately, intrigued by his talent and his innocence. Over the years, their bond had deepened, evolving from friendship into something more complex, more profound. They had shared secrets, dreams, fears. They had supported each other through scandals, injuries, and personal crises. They were inseparable. Or so Jimin had thought. A sudden movement from Jungkook caught Jimin's attention. His finger twitched. Just a slight jerk, but it was there. Jimin leaned forward, his heart skipping a beat. Kook-ah, he whispered. Can you hear me? Jungkook's eyelids fluttered. Once. Twice. Then, slowly, painfully, they opened. His eyes were clouded, unfocused, struggling to adjust to the light. He looked around the room, confusion etched on his face. When his gaze landed on Jimin, a flicker of recognition sparked in his eyes. Hyung? Jungkook's voice was a dry croak, barely audible. Jimin's breath hitched. Tears sprang to his eyes again, but this time they were tears of relief. I'm here, Kook-ah. I'm here. Jungkook tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. RM handed him a cup of water with a straw, helping him take small sips. After a few moments, Jungkook seemed to gather his strength. He looked at Jimin, his expression serious, almost fearful. "Hyung," he whispered. "There's something I need to tell you." Jimin frowned, a sense of unease creeping into his chest. "What is it? Are you in pain? Do you need the doctor?" Jungkook shook his head weakly. "No. Not pain. A secret. I've been hiding it for a long time." Jimin exchanged a glance with RM, who looked equally confused. "What secret, Kook-ah?" Jungkook took a deep, shaky breath. The collapse, it wasn't an accident. It wasn't just stress. He paused, closing his eyes as if gathering courage.